Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. Well, freedom is really what we're about. The divine plan is one of freedom. That's God's will for us, is to be spiritually free. Free to express who and what we truly are, who we're created to be, and free to experience life, free from pain and struggle. Amen? Amen. Sounds good. How do we get there? Well, the good news is that these principles that we teach here in Unity of divine expression, of connection and oneness, and healing and wholeness and abundance, they all work guaranteed, but you got to practice them. Got really quiet in here all of a sudden. And that's the kind of good news, bad news. Good news, they always work. Bad news, you got to actually do something. The good news is that it's not arbitrary. You do the practices, you will receive the results in your life. It's the way it works. The practices, which we've been exploring all month long, we began with the first week talking about meditation. The second week we talked about affirmative prayer, not praying to a distant God to give us something we don't have, but praying from that Christ presence within us to claim our good. Last week, Reverend Sheila did a beautiful Father's Day talk on service, the way we are giving of our time and energy to support each other. That is a spiritual practice, and we practice that here at Unity. Today, we're talking about denial and affirmation, and then next week, I'm going to bring it home with giving, generosity as a spiritual practice, which leads us right into a prosperity series we're doing in July. So we're here to support you in becoming free at last. That's what it's about. So today we're doing denials and affirmation. This is classic metaphysics. This was really just the essence of our teaching. Early metaphysical teachers, this is one of the things that they spoke of so often, that these are a paired, I think of them as really one practice, but they're two sides of this. We deny that which is not true, and we claim that which is true. In our fall deepening program called Adventures in Faith, we're beginning at the end of September, the whole church is going to do a study together of Lessons in Truth by Dr. Emily Cady. I thought it would be wonderful for our 100th anniversary year that we all study together a book that this church has been studying in every generation. This was written in 1891. It's part of Unity Magazine, first printed as a series of lessons, metaphysical lessons, and the work is timeless, powerful. It's just as alive today as it was when she wrote it over 120 years ago. This is what she says about denials. One of the methods that they have found will work every time in getting rid of troublesome conditions, which are the result of erroneous thinking and feeling, is to deny them in toto. First, to deny that any such things have or could have power to make us unhappy. And second, to deny that these things do really exist in reality at all. So, the troublesome conditions that we have in our lives, we can come at them with this spiritual practice called denial, saying that my happiness, my joy, my centeredness, my well-being is not dependent upon any condition in the outer world. It has no power to change who I am as a child of God. And then second, and this is where all the older metaphysical teachers, they agree, it's to deny its existence at all. That there is no spiritual truth. There is an erroneous belief, an error thought, a limiting idea that is keeping this thing in place, and we can deny that it is actually even there. Emily Cady also says, the saying over and over of any denial or affirmation is a necessary self-training of a mind that has lived so long in error and false belief that it needs this constant repetition of truth to unclothe it and clothe it anew. In the 12 steps, we often hear the phrase, repetition strengthens and confirms. We all inherit wrong ideas about the way the world works. We get them from our family. How many of you had family members that went through the Depression and you inherited some ideas around scarcity? And you better take care of what you get because it can go away. Those just one example. We get ideas about illness. We get ideas about who's in and who's out of the circle, inclusion and exclusion. All of those false ideas that get handed down to us. That's why she says we may need constant repetition of telling our mind the truth, to unclothe, to deny that which isn't true, and then to clothe, to affirm that which is true. The simplest way I know how to say it with denials and affirmations, and I thought about this the last few weeks as I've been preparing for this message, is just this. It's to deny, to say no to that thought that would make us smaller, and to affirm, to say yes to that thought which would grow and expand us. Can you begin to feel that? It is in our thought that we interact with divine law and principle. And when we make agreement with thoughts that constrict and diminish us, we need to deny that. That's not true. It's not denial in the sense like, this isn't really happening. We don't deny the condition. We don't say that there's money in the bank account if there's no money in the bank account. That is just crazy. We don't do that. But what we do is deny that scarcity is a spiritual reality. I may temporarily be experiencing no money in the bank account, but my truth is divine abundance. Scarcity is not a power in my life. I deny its reality. And we do that daily, constantly, and then affirming the truth, clearing that the old thought that's in the way, and then bringing a new thought that is steeped and grounded in divine truth and principle. That's denial and affirmation. I'd like to tell a story to illustrate it. Are you okay with that? We had a wonderful conference. The theme was One Humanity, Many Stories, and we heard some incredible storytellers, and it inspired me. I wanted to share a story for the teaching today. This story comes from in the Hebrew Scriptures, 1 Samuel chapter 17. Begins with a battleground. Now, before we get too far into that, this is story. This is symbolic. This is to move us in our consciousness. I'm not in any way condoning violence. There will even be talk of death and carcasses. Believe me, it's just symbol. It's metaphor. Don't worry about it. You know, all the great stories deal with these wonderful themes and these great, just sort of climactic battles. Well, you can view it from a dualistic point of view, like good versus evil. That's not what we teach. That's not who we are in unity. It's about, for me today, this story is about the battle against the unreal so that the real may prevail in our lives. So, begins with a battle. There was a valley, and on one hill there was the army of Israel, and on the other hill there is the Philistine army, or is it Philistine, which reminds me of another story from musical theater world. A young woman is auditioning for a musical. She comes in and she's like, I'm going to sing this Gershwin song. And the song she's going to sing, it was like, you say potato, and I say patata. You say, remember that one? Let's call the whole thing off. Well, she gets up, she gets in front of the microphone, and she says, you say potato, and I say potato. You say tomato, and I say tomato. Potato, potato, tomato. She was unclear on the concept. Before she even got through the first 8 bars, the people holding audition said, thank you. I think we've heard enough. Thank you, Miss Bernstein. She picks up her bag and said, it's Bernstein, and walks off the stage. So the Philistines, I'm just going to call them that. The army was prepped for battle. Both armies were encamped, and then something unusual happened. A really, really big dude walked out. His name was Goliath of Gath. And he stood in front of the Philistine army, and he shouted across to the Israel army, and he said, let's make this a one-on-one kind of a thing. You send your greatest warrior down here, and we'll just do single combat. And if your dude beats me, then our people will bow to you and serve. But if it turns out like I think it's going to turn out, if I kill your guy, then Israel becomes subject to us. You bow down and serve us. The story tells us that when he did this, all of the Israelite army, including King Saul, were dismayed and terrified. Now, I have been one or the other. I don't remember ever being both at the same time. Do you? Where I'm like, oh my God, it's so sad. I'm dismayed. And I'm terrified what's going to happen. But that's what it says. The scripture tells us they were dismayed and terrified. And every day, the same thing. It said when he would come out and he would make his boasts and his threats, that the front line of the Israelite army would run away. They would flee. There was so much fear coming for this man. And according to the text, he's pretty fearful. He was 6 cubits and 1 span tall. Oh, you don't know the metric system? It's not metric system. It roughly means 9.5 feet. Yeah. So let me just also say the ancient people were less concerned with accuracy and measures than we are today. But anyway, 9.5 feet. His armored breastplate weighed 5,000 shekels. That's heavy, 150 pounds. Big, bad dude. And every day, he walks in front of his army, and he shouts across, hurling threats and insults to the Israelite army. And this went on for 40 days. You heard that number before in these stories? There's no mistake there. Numbers are very important, especially to the ancient people of the Jewish culture. This number is code for that's the time it's going to take for something to change and transform. Think about it with the 40 days and nights of rain for Noah's flood. You think about Jesus went 40 days and nights into the desert to fast and pray before beginning his earthly ministry. When the children of Israel were moving to the promised land, how long did they wander in the wilderness? 40 years. A time of transformation where the old passes away. So there's a clue already in this story that it's probably going to turn out pretty good. That something is going to change. Well, near the end of that 40 days, up in Bethlehem, quite a ways away from the battle, is Jesse. Jesse had 8 sons. The oldest is, I forgot. I'm trying to remember. I had the names memorized for the first service. I really did, I promise. I'll just make one up here in a minute. Eliab. The second was Abinadab. Nope. What is it? Abinadab. And the third was Shammah. Aren't those great names? Well, Eliab, the eldest, and those 3 were fighting in Saul's army. We don't know what the next 4 were doing, but David, the youngest, was tending his father's flocks. And Jesse called David in from the fields, and he said, listen, we haven't heard anything about this battle in a long time. I need you to take these supplies up to the battle. Take these 10 units of grain to your brothers, and take these 10 cheeses to their commanders. I don't know the metaphysical meaning of 10 cheeses. I have no idea. But anyway, that's what he told them to do. So David arrived in the camp. And have you ever walked into a room where you know an argument's just taken place and it's really quiet, but it just feels weird? Can you imagine? 40 days, this fear and dismay that's been going around the camp. David walks in and is like, whoa, what's happening here? This feels odd. Doesn't feel good. And then the big dude walks out and does it again. Bring out your greatest warrior, and if I defeat him, you will bow down and serve us. But if he kills me, well then, we'll serve you. And David was like, how long has this been going on? They're like, 40 days, give or take. And he said, and who's going to fight him? And they all just kind of took a step back. It's like, why aren't we sending out a warrior? And they're like, have you seen 6 cubits and a span? The dude is huge. His breastplate weighs more than you do, kid. And they said, well, we should do this. And they said, well, Saul has he's kind of offered a nice prize package for whoever will kill him. First of all, you're going to get great riches. It's not defined in shekels or any other denomination, just great riches. For most, that would be a good motivation, right? We like having some riches around. But that's not all. The second prize is that you get to marry King Saul's daughter, a princess, for you, if you killed the giant. Mary Morrissey, when she teaches from this story, she actually says we've mistitled it. It's not David and Goliath, it's David and the princess. But there's even more, and my libertarian brothers and sisters will appreciate this. They were also promised tax-free status for you and your family for perpetuity. So I guess those riches you got are also tax-free, so it becomes a little bit more enticing. I mean, that sounds good to me. And so David's like, really? And he's asking somebody else. And Eliab, his big brother, and you have to understand something here too, that primogeniture was the way that inheritance law worked in Jewish culture in that time, which meant that the firstborn son inherited everything. And so there's an earlier story where the prophet Samuel had been told by God to go into the house of Jesse and anoint one of the sons, and they went through all 7 before they got to David, and David got the anointing from Samuel. And I'm sure that stung Eliab a little bit. And so now here we are in this great battle set to happen, and here comes little David from the fields again, asking and talking big game, like we should be out there kicking this guy's butt, and why are you all just so terrified and dismayed? And there's good prizes. And Eliab said, you're just conceited. Why are you causing this trouble? And David said, can I even talk? But he kept asking, what are we going to do? Someone needs to do something. And finally, King Saul heard about this shepherd kid and called him into the throne room or the tent, wherever he was. And David, this young shepherd boy, said, I will do this. I will slay this giant. King Saul looked at him, and Saul was a warrior leader, great warrior. And he looked at him, and he was a youth, he said. Although he was handsome and well-formed, I don't know who wrote it, but that's what they say. You've seen the Michelangelo statue, right? Okay. But he was young and kind of scrawny, not fully developed. And Saul was like, no way, you're just a kid. You can't be this great warrior champion. And David said, well, hold on a second. I am not without experience. David would be great in a job interview, I'll tell you this. I have no experience in killing giants, but let me tell you what I have done. He said, sometimes a lion would come and would attack my father's flock, and I would chase down the lion and pull the lamb from its jaws, and when it turned on me, I would defeat it with my arm. And the same thing happened with a bear. Yeah, that's right, a bear. And then he said, and the same power of the Lord that helped me overcome the lion's jaw and the bear's paw will deliver this giant into my hand. That's some confidence. Enough to get him the job. Saul said, you're on. And they ordered out Saul's own tunic and armor and sword and javelin to be brought in. They got him all geared up. And have you ever seen like a 13-year-old kid wearing his grandpa's suit? you know what that looks like, right? Where it's just like, oh, it's just hanging on him. That's what I picture David with all of King Saul's battle armor on. And David's like, no, I can't do this. This isn't mine. This isn't right. The symbology here is that when you are called into this work of defeating the giant of your thought, of your false belief, you cannot do it on somebody else's consciousness. You can't bring somebody else's experience. You must bring your own. And so David took off the armor, laid down the sword and the javelin, And with nothing but his staff, his shepherd's staff, and a sling and a pouch, he goes down to a stream and finds how many? 5 smooth stones. Now, there are those who teach metaphysical Bible interpretation that will tell you that if you see this in the Bible, it always means this. I like a much more fluid and dynamic kind of relationship with these ancient texts of all the faith traditions. I think they are pregnant, and they will speak to different people in different ways. But I do think it's really amazing that back the ancient Hebrew people wrote a story about our 5-part spiritual practice series we're doing this week at Unity of Houston. Because that's what I believe those 5 stones represent. Are practices that prepare us to strike down the giant of our false belief. And you know what's interesting about a river stone, right? They're constantly in the stream. And all of the corners have been broken off. They become smooth. And that's what happens to us when we submerge ourselves in the stream of Spirit in our practice, our meditation, our prayer, our service, our denials and affirmations, our generosity. We become smooth and available so God can use us. And we begin to hold these practices more easily. And so David, with his 5 stones and his sling and his staff, he goes to the line, and here comes Goliath one more time. Bring out your greatest warrior, and I will chew him up and spit him out. Feed him to the birds. And David speaks up. This is David's response. If I can get there. He says, verse 45, David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. I will strike you down and cut off your head. This day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." I told you we were going to mention carcasses. If you're in a battle, you think you would need the right tools, what everybody is using, and this guy that you're meeting, the enemy, he's got great weapons, and that's what your carnal mind, your human mind would say, I need to match at the level of condition with what I'm facing. But David knew better. In this story, David represents our heart's desire for growth and for God. I mean, really, in the later, David is described in scriptures as being a man after God's own heart. That David is not convinced by the things that he sees in the world of conditions. He knows there's something greater at work. And so he says, I will not beat you with sword and spear, but by the power of God. And so this is what, I don't know why this part of the story moves me so much. Earlier in the story, it would say that the front line of the Israel army, every time that Goliath would come out to taunt and threaten, they would flee. And so here David is standing in front of the line, and here comes this giant of this ogre, this great man of power and strength, and threatening to kill him. And it says, David ran towards him. I just get chills. He ran towards him. David was not deceived into thinking that physical might is the greatest power on hand. And he took a stone into his sling, and you probably know the story. He slung it around. It says the stone sunk into the forehead of the giant, and he fell dead. He then went over and took Goliath's own sword and cut off his head. I'm not just being gross. There is a metaphysical meaning in that too. Tell me, where is it we interact with divine potential and divine law and divine principle? In our thought. We are a part of a new thought movement. It's a metaphysical teaching based upon the principle that if we can think and hold and believe a new thought of spiritual reality, we will experience a new condition. And so the giant represents your false belief, your error thought, your limitation, that thing that says you'll never find a husband, that thing that says you will never get out of this debt, that thing that says you will never get over this illness. And it's big and it's scary, and we do become dismayed and terrified. And yet David reminds us that within us there is a heart that knows God, that knows power, that knows possibility, that is not freaked out by the big guy. And so when David sees Goliath, he runs towards him, knocks him down with a stone, kills him, and cuts off the head. That is to symbolize that we deny the power of that negative thought. We remove the head of it in our lives. I don't know what your giant is today, but I know you have one. I know there's some old idea and belief that has been keeping you stuck, but your 40 days are up. It's time to find that David energy within you, to deny the validity of that power to hold you back. It has no power. That's denial, right? It has no power. I am a man, a woman after God's own heart. Our spiritual walk, our spiritual path is evolutionary. Nobody is done. I don't know if you got that message or not. Life will help you. If you feel like you've graduated, it will reveal to you you haven't. All of us are called to the next chapter of our freedom and fulfillment. And often the doorway looks like a big hairy giant. It looks like this diagnosis, this thing that's like so awful in front of us. And how are we going to get to that thing that we know is calling to us? We don't wait on somebody else. We don't use somebody else's spiritual practice and teaching. We do our own work, and we run to the battle. I want to remind you, we are not about spiritual perfection. We are about spiritual practice here at Unity. That you are not expected to heal everything in your life. Well, I guess you might, and you would certainly be welcome to that experience, and you'll be up here next Sunday to tell us how you did that. But what is the thing that's just, the thing that's up right now? I had a friend of mine in AA. She was talking about, it's like I'm trying to hold down 12 volleyballs in a swimming pool. Can you picture that? And so which thing do you attend to? Whichever one pops up. That's what you bring to your spiritual practice. I love that we have community, don't you? If you're new here and you haven't got a chance to plug in and build those relationships, yes. If you haven't had a chance to connect in small groups or in classes, I really encourage you to come and get involved at that level. We can really get inspired by these stories on Sunday, but we have to build those relationships and walk hand in hand with each other. I love what Ram Dass says, we're all walking each other home. I am so in love with the work that we are doing in this community. I am so inspired by the transformations and the healings that you're telling me about in your lives. I say it almost every Sunday, but something really is happening here. It really is. Things are emerging, taking root and flowering and bearing fruit. And it's happening through you and through me. As we defeat the giant of our false and limiting beliefs, denying its power, and we affirm the truth of who we are transformed. You are amazing. You are amazing. I love you. God bless you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.